In international relations, alliances often follow predictable lines: neighbors, old partners. But on November 12, 2025, a handshake in Algiers broke the mold. Somalia and Algeria, separated by the Sahara, signed a pact that could reshape Africa's future. This wasn't just another diplomatic gesture, it was a strategic pivot. Somalia, emerging from decades of conflict, seeks partners who offer support, not control.
Somalia military and Turkey's special forces opening a new military base in the northern region of Somalia, Laskari. Pakistan and Saudi forces will also join them to help deter any sovereignty violations. Somalia vowed to defend its territorial integrity.
Somalia has sought to strengthen its ties with Egypt, a long-time rival of Ethiopia, particularly over control of the Nile waters. And now, as we mentioned at the start, Egyptian military aid is arriving in Mogadishu. So why is Ethiopia nervous about this move?
I think it does alarm Ethiopia a bit, just as the MOU with Somaliland alarms Somalia a bit. And so the problem is everyone's trying to outdo each other and get the
Denmark, Greece, Pakistan, Panama.
In order to provide logistical support to our Somali-Turkish Task Force Command and to support the drilling ship Charter Bay, which will conduct research activities in the maritime jurisdiction areas of the Federal Republic of Somalia, between January 30th and February 25th, our naval elements consisting of TCG Sankaktar, TCG Gokova, and TCG Bafra, which will perform duties in the Gulf of Aden, off the coast of Somalia, and in the Arabian Sea, will make a port visit to Djibouti on February 6th and 7th and will reach Somalia on February 11th.
Somalia has long been viewed through the narrow lens of crisis, instability, and external dependency. Yet beneath that familiar narrative, a quieter transformation has been unfolding, one that is now drawing intense attention from global capitals. New diplomatic alignments, shifting security partnerships, and a recalibration of economic relationships are reshaping Somalia's place in regional and global politics. These changes are subtle in form but profound in implication, and they explain why decision-makers in Washington are watching events in the Horn of Africa with growing unease. For decades, Somalia's external relationships followed a predictable pattern. Security assistance, humanitarian aid, and political mediation flowed largely through Western channels, with policy priorities shaped outside Somali borders. This arrangement was justified as necessary for stability, yet it often left Somalia with limited room to define its own long-term strategy. Over time, public frustration grew. Many citizens and policymakers alike began to question why sovereignty felt conditional and why development gains remained fragile despite years of international involvement. What has changed in recent years is not a single dramatic announcement but a gradual shift in orientation. Somalia has begun diversifying its partnerships, reaching beyond traditional allies to engage with a wider range of global and regional actors. These new relationships are built on pragmatic interests: port development, infrastructure, investment, energy exploration, maritime security, and trade access. Rather than relying on one dominant external patron, Somalia is experimenting with a multipolar approach that reflects a broader global trend. This recalibration has been especially visible in the maritime domain. Somalia's coastline, one of the longest in Africa, sits astride some of the world's most critical shipping lanes. Control over ports, logistics hubs, and maritime security frameworks carries enormous strategic value by negotiating new port agreements and security arrangements that involve non-Western partners. Somalia is asserting greater control over its maritime future. This directly affects global trade flows and naval calculations, which explains why the shift has not gone unnoticed. Economic considerations are equally central. Somalia's leadership has increasingly emphasized investment-led development rather than aid dependence. New alliances have opened doors to infrastructure financing that comes with fewer political conditions and faster implementation timelines. Roads, ports, telecommunications, and energy projects are being framed as national priorities rather than owner-driven initiatives. This approach resonates domestically, where there is growing demand for tangible improvements in daily life rather than abstract governance reforms. From Washington's perspective, this evolution raises complex questions. The United States has long viewed the Horn of Africa as a strategically sensitive region due to its proximity to major shipping routes, the Middle East, and key security theaters. Stability in Somalia has been treated as a core interest, but stability has often been defined in terms of alignment with Western security frameworks. As Somalia broadens its diplomatic options, Washington faces the reality that influence is no longer guaranteed by default. Security cooperation lies at the heart of this anxiety. Somalia's fight against militant groups has relied heavily on external assistance, including training, intelligence, and logistical support. While these partnerships continue, Somalia has signaled that it wants greater autonomy in how security is managed and who participates. Engaging new partners in defense and security sectors introduces alternative doctrines, technologies, and strategic priorities. For Washington, this diversification complicates coordination and reduces leverage. Regional dynamics further amplify the significance of Somalia's new alliances. The Horn of Africa is experiencing a period of intense geopolitical competition, with multiple powers seeking access, influence, and strategic footholds. Somalia's decisions do not occur in isolation. They interact with broader regional rivalries and economic corridors. By positioning itself as an independent actor rather than a passive arena, Somalia is changing how power is distributed across the region. Public opinion inside Somalia has played a crucial role in enabling this shift. Years of external intervention have created skepticism toward arrangements perceived as unequal or intrusive. There is a growing sense that Somalia must engage the world on its own terms, choosing partners based on mutual benefit rather than historical precedent. This sentiment has given political leaders the domestic backing needed to pursue a more assertive foreign policy. Washington's nervousness is also shaped by precedent. Across Africa and other parts of the global south, similar patterns are emerging. Countries are reassessing long-standing relationships, seeking alternatives, and leveraging competition among major powers to secure better deals. Somalia's case fits squarely within this global realignment. What makes it particularly sensitive is Somalia's strategic location and symbolic significance as a country once considered heavily dependent on Western support. Another factor contributing to unease is the narrative shift. Somalia is no longer presenting itself primarily as a recipient of assistance but as a partner with assets to offer. This reframing challenges traditional power dynamics. When a country negotiates from a position of perceived value control of ports, access to markets, strategic geography, it alters the balance of negotiations. Washington must now compete, rather than assume primacy, in its engagement with Somalia. The economic implications extend beyond Somalia's borders. New trade routes, port developments, and logistics networks could redirect regional commerce. If Somalia succeeds in positioning itself as a hub linking Africa, the Middle East, and Asia, existing trade patterns may shift. Such changes have ripple effects for global supply chains, investment flows, and energy transport. Strategic planners in Washington are acutely aware of how quickly economic geography can reshape political influence. Critically, Somalia's new alliances are not framed as anti-Western. Officials emphasize cooperation with all partners, including the United States. The message is one of balance rather than rejection. Yet balance itself can be unsettling to a power accustomed to centrality. When influence becomes one option among many, it must be earned and maintained through responsiveness and respect rather than assumed continuity. The situation also highlights a broader tension in international relations between values-based diplomacy and interest-based engagement. Western partners often emphasize governance standards, transparency, and institutional reforms. While these goals are not rejected, Somalia's leadership increasingly prioritizes speed, infrastructure, delivery, and economic impact. Partners willing to focus on these areas without extensive conditionality naturally gain traction. This divergence in approach contributes to Washington's discomfort. Looking ahead, Somalia's path is not without risks. Diversifying alliances requires careful management to avoid overdependence on new partners or entanglement in external rivalries. Balancing competing interests demands diplomatic skill and institutional capacity. Yet the willingness to navigate these challenges reflects a growing confidence in Somalia's agency on the world stage. For Washington, the moment calls for adaptation rather than alarm. Somalia's evolution offers an opportunity to redefine engagement on more equal terms. Recognizing Somalia as a sovereign actor with legitimate aspirations could open space for renewed partnership grounded in mutual respect. Failure to adjust, however, risks further erosion of influence in a region that remains strategically vital. Ultimately, Somalia's new alliances are less about provoking anxiety and more about reclaiming choice. After decades of externally driven policy, the country is asserting its right to decide who it works with and on what terms. That assertion, quiet but firm, signals a maturation of Somali statehood. It also serves as a reminder that, in a changing world, influence flows toward those who listen, adapt, and engage as equals. Washington's nervousness, then, is not just about Somalia, it is about the broader transformation of global power relations now unfolding in real time. As Somalia continues along this path, the deeper significance of its new alliances becomes clearer. What is unfolding is not a sudden break from the past, but a deliberate redefinition of national priorities shaped by hard lessons learned over decades. The country has seen what it means to rely too heavily on a narrow set of external partners, and it has also witnessed how global politics can shift overnight, leaving smaller states exposed. In response, Somalia is choosing flexibility over dependency, options over obligations, and long-term leverage over short-term relief. This strategy is rooted in geography as much as politics. Somalia sits at the crossroads of Africa, the Middle East, and Asia, overlooking sea lanes that carry a substantial share of global trade. For years, this strategic position benefited others more than it benefited Somalis themselves. Foreign navies patrolled nearby waters, international companies negotiated access to ports, and external actors defined security priorities. Now, Somalia is signaling that geography is not a curse to be managed by outsiders but an asset to be leveraged by the state itself. The recalibration of alliances reflects a broader understanding that sovereignty in the modern world is not just about flags and borders, but about economic control, strategic choice, and narrative power. By engaging multiple partners, Somalia reduces the risk of coercion and increases its bargaining position. This does not eliminate vulnerability, but it redistributes it in ways that are more manageable. Instead of being locked into a single framework, Somalia can adjust, renegotiate, and pivot as conditions change. Washington's discomfort stems partly from uncertainty. For decades, policy toward Somalia operated within a familiar structure: security cooperation, aid programs, and diplomatic pressure working in tandem. Predictability made management easier. A Somalia that acts independently, weighing offers from different global actors, is harder to influence and harder to forecast. This uncertainty challenges long-standing assumptions about control and access in the Horn of Africa. At the same time, Somalia's choices reflect a generational shift in political thinking. Younger policymakers and technocrats are less bound by Cold War legacies or post-Cold War aid paradigms. They operate in a world where power is more diffuse and where emerging economies play increasingly central roles. For them, aligning with multiple partners is not ideological. It is practical. The question is no longer who offers approval, but who delivers results. Economic sovereignty lies at the heart of this transformation. Ports, trade corridors, fisheries, and energy resources are being reframed as engines of national revival. Partnerships are judged by their capacity to create jobs, transfer skills, and build infrastructure. This focus resonates strongly with a population eager for stability that is visible and measurable. Roads, ports, electricity, and employment carry more political weight than diplomatic statements or donor conferences. The implications extend beyond Somalia itself. Other countries in the region are watching closely. If Somalia demonstrates that diversification brings tangible benefits without triggering isolation, it could accelerate similar shifts elsewhere. This potential domino effect heightens Washington's concern because influence lost in one country can quickly translate into diminished leverage across an entire region. Yet it would be a mistake to interpret Somalia's new alliances as inherently confrontational. The country has repeatedly emphasized openness to cooperation with all partners, including the United States. What has changed is the expectation of equality. Somalia is no longer willing to be treated solely as a security problem or a humanitarian case study. It wants recognition as a strategic actor with its own interests and red lines. For Washington, this moment presents a choice. One path leads toward resistance, pressure, and attempts to reassert dominance through familiar tools. The other leads toward adaptation, partnership, and a willingness to compete constructively in a multipolar environment. History suggests that the latter approach yields more sustainable influence, particularly in regions where memories of external control remain vivid. Somalia's trajectory is still unfolding, and challenges remain significant. Internal political cohesion, institutional capacity, and security threats continue to test the state. New alliances alone cannot resolve these issues. However, the confidence to choose partners rather than inherit them marks an important psychological and strategic shift. It signals a country that sees itself not as a permanent subject of global decision-making, but as a participant in it. In the end, the nervousness in Washington is less about Somalia's actions than about what they represent. They reflect a world where influence must be negotiated, not assumed, and where smaller states increasingly assert agency in shaping their futures. Somalia's evolving foreign policy is a case study in this broader transformation. The story, then, is not one of defiance for its own sake, but of recalibration. Somalia is testing the boundaries of its independence, learning how to balance competing interests, and discovering the leverage inherent in its geography and resources. Whether this strategy succeeds will depend on discipline, transparency, and the ability to manage complex relationships without becoming entangled in external rivalries. What is already clear is that the era of automatic alignment is fading. Somalia's new alliances signal a desire for strategic adulthood, where choices are made deliberately and consequences are accepted soberly. For global powers accustomed to clear hierarchies, this is unsettling. For Somalia, it is a necessary step toward a more self-directed future. As the global order continues to shift, Somalia's experience may become increasingly relevant. It illustrates how countries once defined by weakness can redefine themselves through strategic diversification. Washington's unease is a measure of that change, and for Somalia, the ability to make powerful actors uneasy may simply be evidence that it is finally being taken seriously as an actor in its own right.